This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy. Head over to GoDaddy.com and use coupon code iFanboy to get 10% off all your purchases. And by Netflix. When you head over to www.netflix.com/iFanboy, you can sign up for as little as $4.99, rent DVDs, keep them for as long as you want, watch them as much as you want, return them when you want, and they pay for all the shipping. So that's www.netflix.com/iFanboy.
What is this, another British creator?
Wasn't me.
He's good.
Welcome to iFanboy, the video podcast from the comic book discussion site iFanboy.com. I'm Josh, and I'm here with
Connor.
And of course.
And I'm Ron.
Yes.
And it's been a while since we've kind of taken a look at one specific creator's work, so we thought we'd take a look at it, and I drew the long straw and got the pick, and I thought we'd talk about Alan Davis. Alan Davis is one of my personal favorite creators, and he's had a pretty solid footprint over the past 20 years in comics, both in superhero comics and Marvel and DC. So I thought it'd be kind of good to take a look at him, and I know I'm well versed in his au revoir, and you somewhat are, and you not so much, so it's gonna be a little learning experience.
You're probably also versed in his oeuvre.
Oeuvre. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. Au revoir would be goodbye.
Okay. Au revoir. Anyway, so
no more foreign languages for you. Just straight ahead English.
I've seen his work. I know that he doesn't show up that often.
Right.
It's sort of like he'll pop out every year or two and work on something for a little while, and then he'll scuttle back to his castle, which is on Hertfordshire Tyne, I suppose. Yeah.
Anyway, so he's British, hence the accent. Some it may not. We know this very well, but not everyone may not know. But England has actually been a bumper crop of comic creators over the past 20 years or so. A lot of great creators have come out of the
English
UK.
invasion,
The English invasion,
it's
yes.
more than 20 years now.
Yes. And some of the most notable ones are like Alan Moore and writers like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and Garth Ennis and he's Irish, whatever. And most recently we've had
He's actually from Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK.
Okay then. And then we've got some other artists like Brian Hitch and other folks who don't come to me right now. But Alan Davis actually was a British creator and came out of that similar kind of crop that Alan Moore did. He was that same kind of generation. What some people might not remember, but Marvel had a UK imprint.
Marvel UK
that used some of the characters from regular Marvel, but they also had their own line of characters, and they were publishing their own comics that were independent of what was being published here in America.
615 universe?
It probably was. Anyway, but one such title was Captain Britain, which it
was a big deal.
It was a big deal. It was actually Captain Britain was actually created by Chris Claremont and Herb Trimpe in the 70s, and they brought they logically brought Captain Britain over to Marvel UK, where Alan Davis pretty much became most well known for his work in Captain Britain, with a little up and coming writer named Alan Moore.
Yep.
Alan Moore actually wrote a lot of the old Captain Britain stories. Alan Davis drew them.
And then what happened?
Then things didn't go so well. Alan Moore doesn't really get along with the companies, and for years there's been an argument over the reprinting rights of these, because Marvel UK went under. That's a whole nother story. And the Marvel US kind of inherited the Captain Britain stories, wanted to reprint them. Alan Moore wouldn't allow them to. Finally, a few years ago, Joe Quesada made a big deal that he went to Alan Moore, he apologized for everything Marvel's done, made a deal, said, okay, let's reprint it. So they printed the trade paperback, and they forgot to put Alan Moore's name on it. Through a printing error. And how
do you do that?
I don't know.
The man's got a black cloud about it.
How does that slip through?
I know, of all things, no credit. So Alan Moore then said, I'm never working with Marvel ever again. So if you can find that trade, get it. They did correct it. But if you can find that, it's really good stuff.
They fixed it, but they didn't fix it. Fix the problem. Alan Moore is done with Marvel.
But Alan Davis was okay with it because his name was on it, so that's okay. But actually, when Alan Davis worked with Alan Moore on Captain Britain, they kind of hit a stride, and they did some work in 2000 AD, which is the
British comic anthology, where pretty much anybody who's anybody from the British comic scene started out.
Yep. And they actually worked on a series called DR and Quinch. which for 2000 AD. That was their story. That was their big one. That makes it sound. It sounds like a buddy cop show or something. But that actually got a lot of continued their collaboration, and they liked working together so much that Alan Davis got pulled into some of the Marvel Man stories.
Marvel Man, Miracle Man.
Marvel Man, Miracle Man, which again is another whole topic. But that was
we should do a show on Alan Moore's legal issues.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We'll have a large docket, an affidavit, and also perhaps
we'll bring a barrister in.
Yeah, with the powdered wigs and stuff. But Marvel Man was originally called Marvel Man, and it was like the British kind of. It's hard to explain, but
it's a little like Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
it's that you say a secret word and he turns it
Kimota.
And then I don't know. I've never read the whole thing.
Yeah,
but it's good looking. It's good drawn.
Yeah. It is, and it's also you'll never read it because it's caught up in a legal wrangle.
Which we'll deal with in our legal show.
The Marvel Captain Britain thing was bad.
Ooh, this one's even worse. Neil Gaiman's involved in there, and Alan Moore, and a whole bunch of folks. But Alan Davis did draw a bunch of it, and that's kind of where he became most notable in the mid-'80s. And so, like any aspiring artist, he made the jump across the pond and started working at DC first. And that's kind of where you became most familiar with him.
Yeah, a lot of my early memories of reading comics are from Batman Detective comics that were drawn by Alan Davis. He really formed the imprint. I think it was mostly detective comics, and he did some Batman and the Outsiders too, but for a long time the image I had of Batman was the way Alan Davis drew him.
And that's the thing about his
and
art.
Robin too, he had the two little curls here.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Alan Davis's art is that, and for a lot of characters, me as well, Alan Davis defined the looks of characters like Captain Britain or Batman and stuff like that. And he has an ability to draw people in costume, but still with expressionless faces in a unique way, the way nobody else draws.
Well, first of all, there's no one else who draws people like Alan Davis. He's totally distinct in the way his faces look. Yeah. A lot of guys, they're very similar. The way they learn to draw is the same. But Alan Davis is so unique. You look at it, Alan Davis's art just from looking at it.
And it really becomes kind of representative of a time period when you get into comics like we did. You kind of associate with that.
I see him as a slightly more elegant, slightly smoother, but in the George Perez school, if that makes sense. You take a George Perez drawing and you just sort of elongate it just a little bit, and you brush away some of the extra lines, and you smooth it all out, and you're left with the Alan Davis. It's in the Neil Adams school, I think, a little bit.
Brian Bolland, like you were
definitely. I think he's very similar to Brian Bolland's. Except Brian Bolland doesn't really do interiors. He only kind of did
the Brian Bolland George Perez Venn diagram, and you put it together, and then you find in the middle you get Alan Davis.
And you can see where current artists from England, like Brian Hitch, you can see how Brian Hitch could get there based off growing up reading Alan Davis comics and stuff like that. So it's very fascinating, that whole deal.
It's very classic superhero to me. I mean, because you said that's the kind of thing that defines what you think they look like. Like they all have the superhero body and the costume.
They're also very lithe.
Yeah,
I remember Robin always had really skinny legs.
Well, but the thing was that he didn't just have a template for each character. No. He drew the character the way they should look. And we're going to talk about one of his later works, JLA the Nail. But like for example, his Flash in JLA the Nail was very thin and lanky because he's a runner, and so he makes the adaptations to the characters as needed. Yep. But he can do big barrel chested like he did with Captain Britain, and he could do
Superman.
Yeah, Superman. But then Green Lantern is a little more, fleshed out, and Batman was kind of a balance of the two. He was still a man, but you could see abs and you could see good anatomy. He's got great anatomy.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, no.
Was a man. Go ahead.
But one of the things, one of the most notable Batman works he did was the Year 2, which doesn't get as much credit as Year 1.
Year 2, well, there's a good reason, because Year 1 was one complete story by a writer and artist, whereas Year 2, there was one writer, Mike W. Barr, who was writing Detective at the time, but Alan Davis started drawing it, and then he, for whatever reason, I don't know, couldn't finish it. So Todd McFarlane, a young guy just coming up in the scene.
Todd McFarlane.
Nothing's gonna happen with that guy.
He didn't go anywhere.
He finished it, and this is early Todd McFarlane, so it's not the one you associate with like Spider-Man.
He also hadn't sort of gained the ability to say, I'm going to draw like this, and if you don't want me to, screw you. So he kind of had to work within the studio system a little bit.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's an interesting story. It's not nearly as iconic as Year 1, which we never hear about Year 2.
But it does feature one of the most freaking scariest character designs I've ever seen. You recently got me Year 2, and a while back, and I was reading it, and I remember being freaked out by the Reaper.
Yeah.
This character, the Reaper, with two big sickles for hands, and like a
skull face
and like a red leather armor with spikes,
like in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes, yeah.
That kind of armor, the Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
They kind of use it for the Mask of the Phantasm movie, that kind of design for that bad guy. Yeah, but he was a really scary villain, and then that carried over to this. This is actually an original graphic novel, rare prestige size, but not really thick. But it's the sort of the sequel, Batman Full Circle. The Reaper comes back, and it all comes full circle.
Yeah,
but also Alan Davis and Mike W. Barr.
Yeah. So they got to finish their story.
Yep.
So apparently they parted amicably. Right. They were able to come back.
So his Batman work really kind of led to his Marvel work, which we'll get to in a second. But then he came back to DC in the late '90s, and he did a Elseworlds tale, a 3-issue Elseworlds story that, which is interesting about most creators. Typically you've got writers and you've got artists, and some artists become writers, some writers try art, some people go back and forth, but very few are able to, I think, do it consistently. Like
especially out of the British
superheroes,
the British invasion, if you want to call it that way.
Yeah,
a lot of them are just delineated, one of the two.
Yeah, right.
Alan Davis is one of the few writer artists coming out of that. Especially, he's one of those guys who built up his clout as an artist and now says, "Oh, so I'm going to write now."
And a lot of times when people do that's not that uncommon. Artists will very often take on the writer chore, but when you then go ahead, decide to do that, and it comes out as something really memorable and good, that's something special.
And and are able to prolong it. And like I said, especially within the Marvel DC kind of camps of kind of thing.
And granted, it hasn't always worked out for him, because we'll get to some other books he wrote that were not very good. But his 3-issue Prestige mini.
Those are. I got to go to the long box for those.
And that was excellent. And then there was the 2-issue sequel, Another Nail.
Yeah.
Again.
Very good.
It was
this time it's rusty.
An Elseworld story that was kind of almost like a Marvel What If story.
Right. It's Jonathan and Martha Kent are driving along the famous road as the rocket ship comes down, and then they get a nail in their tire, flat tire. They stop. They miss the spaceship. They don't get to pick Kal-El out of the spaceship and race him. So it's a world without Superman. There was no Superman to raise and lead the superheroes.
So what you get is a slightly, very similar to the DC universe, slightly askew.
Yep.
And so what you get is the Justice League who kind of waver.
Well, there's no leadership in the Justice League. There's no one to keep Lex Luthor in check, so he runs Metropolis. He's the mayor. Everything is Lex. Everything.
And more importantly, there's no balance to Batman's darkness, the Superman lightness. So in a gruesome scene in the first issue.
The Joker basically murders Robin and Batgirl in a really gruesome way. He takes pounds of flesh off the bed at once. And he says, "I want my pound of flesh." And he takes them off. It's all off camera.
And so Batman then kills the Joker.
He then murders the Joker. And then in the very beginning, the Justice League goes on a mission, and somebody, I think it's Amazo, somebody super strong, punches Green Arrow and just destroys him. He has a wheelchair, no arms.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of crazy.
He uses his arm a lot.
Yeah, he does.
Well, that's the ironic thing. Yeah. So without someone strong to lead them, they are fractured. Lex Luthor's, unchecked. Batman's got no one to balance him, and where is Superman is the question. He's somewhere, but he's not.
This is another story that, when you want to understand the DC universe, take Superman out of it, you change something about Superman, and those are always sort of the best Elseworld stories because they're so far-reaching. Like, you can do that with Batman stories, but it doesn't really affect everything else that's going on.
The ripple effect is.
Yeah. This is actually one of the first sort of things that I read after I started reading comics, and I just remember loving it because his artwork is sort of almost imperceptibly nicer than everything else. It just looks a little
it really
cleaner.
does. Yeah.
It's just whatever it is a little notch that you go, it's just quite nice.
Yeah.
It's rather lovely.
That's why when he does put something out, I wish he did more. When he does something out, I'll buy it no matter what.
Yeah.
And
the story I thought was really compelling. I thought there was a good ending. It was just it was very good.
Yeah. Very, very
And then the sequel involves Superman because he shows up, spoiler alert, at the end of the 3rd issue. Someone else found him, and then now he's Superman in the sequel.
It wasn't the communists, though.
No. That's Mark Miller.
Mark Miller did that.
Actually, this time it was the Amish.
Oh, you just ruined it.
Oh.
But you're right. Alan Davis is one of those few artists that I will.
He's a fine Kryptonian.
He raises barns like nobody's business. He just like barns all over the place. But he's one of the few artists I will. Want to buy from the art standpoint. Like Kevin Maguire, Alan Davis, they're from that same period. They're sort of similar clean styles, and those are the guys I will buy based on the art alone.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Mostly, like, not some of this stuff.
Now, Ron.
Yeah.
You're familiar with Alan Davis because of a specific book, probably. And maybe this could even have skewed your opinion of him going forward?
Tiny bit. My comic love of my life and the comic that got me into comics and into the X-Men universe, stuff like that, was a book called Excalibur. And this right here,
roll tape.
I'm shocked
on the story.
And right here is no, I'm not gonna tell the story. You can go back and find it. But right here is issue number 1, first printing in my bag and board.
Even I have that.
And, I was so happy when I got this, dude. Like
What'd you pay for it?
I think like $25.
I think I paid 17 for mine.
Yeah.
And at 14 years old, I don't know why.
Don't even look it up on eBay.
I got into Excalibur at issue number 19, so I went back and bought all the back issues. Excalibur was so in the late 80s in the X-Men, there was a storyline where Kitty, Nightcrawler, and Phoenix, Rachel Summers kind of go to England. I forget why. And while that happened, the X-Men faked their deaths in Dallas, and everybody thought they were dead. And so Kitty, Kurt, Nightcrawler, and Phoenix are there in England hanging out with Captain Britain and his girlfriend Megan, and there are no more X-Men, and they decide to join as a team, and they form Excalibur, which is like the British X-Men. I love England.
With how many Brits? 2?
With 1, really, because Megan's more of an elemental.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I bet she has an accent.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, possibly.
Fantasy characters very often have British accents, or Russian submarine commanders, but whatever.
So what happens then is that Alan Davis and Chris Claremont wrote this as well, and they kind of return back to the Captain Britain character that he worked on previously in the early 80s, and him and Chris Claremont wrote a lot of very kind of mythical stories in the first 20 issues. There was a story arc called The Cross Time Caper, where they went through different parts of the Marvel multiverse, and there was one that was...
There's a Marvel multiverse?
There is.
No one ever talks about that.
And they see different variations of the Excalibur team in those ones. Like there's a Nazi Excalibur team, which is kind of interesting. They fight them, and so I don't know. But this is the book that A, introduced me to the X-Men, but also introduced me to Alan Davis.
And introduced the world to the concept of 616.
Yes.
Which we're all
actually,
so
that was back
thankful
to
of.
Captain Britain stuff. They did
but this is the whole
one,
realm.
yeah, then
this
they
is the
explored
realm.
it. Yeah. So the multiverse and that Captain Britain, the Britain Corps, the Captain Britain Corps are the ones that look over the omniverse or the multiverse.
Now,
they're like the monitors.
These covers a lot like Brian Bolland covers actually.
Yep.
Or Kevin Maguire you were talking about earlier. The covers are very nice, but they've all got like little jokes on them.
Yeah, the Excalibur, the first 20 issues,
which is not what I think of as a typical Chris Claremont book.
Right.
It not funny.
It had a much more lighthearted, almost kind of fun vibe to it, and honestly, the covers did have. Always had like a little skit or a little joke.
I think that's very of the time. It's not necessarily these guys.
First issue. I don't think I ever noticed that the
werewolves,
whatever that.
Yeah. So.
The of the time is you had a lot of jokey covers.
Yeah.
Like comic. You know, like that was just, I think that was just the time period.
Yeah. So, but anyway, unfortunately, then Alan Davis left Excalibur in like the 20s. There was a bunch of fill-in artists, and then he just fully left. And I was so mad that he left. Heart. It broke my little heart. He went off to do Clandestine, which was a team book. That was kind of like a family team book, very kind of similar, like X-Men kind of vibe.
Clandestine.
Yeah.
Were they spies?
Well, no, they weren't spies.
Clandestine means.
They were, they were kind of undercover, and it was kind of steeped in British kind of lore. There was a lot of kind of mythical kind of
didn't do well, did it?
Medieval. Didn't grab me. I didn't read it when it came out because I was pissed that he left Excalibur. He wrote and drew it. That was his first big kind of I created this whole thing.
Right.
Actually, Marvel's collecting it, and it's being released in hardcover, not omnibus, but hardcover. It has been available for a while, and actually
it really warrants the omnibus. Do you think there's enough people?
And Alan Davis is actually returning to Marvel to do a new Clandestine series in 2008. So later in 2008, so that should be something that I'm going to look out for, because Clandestine, actually, when I went back to it, looked really good. But then after Clandestine, he kind of went away, and I didn't really, for a few years, I don't know what he was doing at that time. Alan, if you're out there, tell us what you were doing. But he came back, and he had a couple of short spurts at Marvel through the late 90s, early 2000s. He was on the Avengers for a while, which was really nice looking.
Yep.
I mean, it was like a good. I mean, it was like it gave the Avengers. For some reason, the Avengers, to me, I mean, they're different now, but Avengers were always very kind of. I don't want to say simple, but very kind of, predictable.
Didn't he follow George Perez?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden it was cleaned up a little. You get to the next year, like, ooh, that's snazzy. But it was on it very long.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. That's the thing. And they left. And then he came to X-Men in the late 90s, Adjectiveless X-Men, where he started plotting with Fabian Nicieza as well as drawing.
And you were super excited.
I was so excited, and then he left. It was very brief, and then
he just keeps disappointing you.
Exactly. And no, seriously. And then he came in. Looking into the show, I realized that the late '90s to like now, every 2 years there was an X-Men reboot.
Yeah,
there really was. And one of the X-Men reboots,
one of these days, it's gonna catch.
Yeah, I think it has now, though. Anyway, but
give it 2 years.
In 2004, he came on and he was kind of integral. Him and Chris Claremont did the reboot again, and he came on and he redesigned all their costumes. Where he introduced the Nightcrawler costume with the X in the middle, and the precursor of the astonishing Wolverine costume. And they had a different spin on the X-Men. They were going to be like a UN-sanctioned, kind of mutant police force type thing. Didn't last very long, again, and he left. But he kind of redemption afoot more recently with Fantastic Four: The End. Marvel's had a bunch of series that have been like the
last
presumably last story. This should not be confused with the last Fantastic Four story that was written by Stan Lee and drawn by John Romita Jr. last year, which was a mess of a book, but let's not get into that. This was a 6-issue miniseries that kind of portrayed the Fantastic Four well into the future. Alan Davis, like everybody, has an affinity for Fantastic Four. And
he does a nice thing.
He does a nice everybody. It was amazing. And so this happens way in the future. Ben Grimm and...
I'm not sure about Sue's haircut.
Well, it's the future.
Yeah, it's the future.
Well, that's why Reed is haggard.
Well, yeah. Well, that's part of the story. Is that what happens is that Ben Grimm has retired, and him and Alicia Masters live on Mars with their kids, and Johnny Storm is in the Avengers, and they're more of a cosmic team. And Reed is held up in a satellite, and he's working so hard, and so Sue is going to leave him, and she's going to go with Namor, but then there's a big cosmic threat, and Annihilus, and Fantastic Four come together along with the Avengers, and of course they succeed and are victorious. But this was just a great series that like literally came out of nowhere. The end books have been kind of throwaways, but kind of they've been hit or miss. The Punisher one was funny because it was a one shot. Yeah. But then like the X-Men one went 8 volumes or whatever. But this Fantastic Four one, the combination of his art, plus he wrote a really good story that really was true to the not only Fantastic Four but to the Marvel Universe, which was interesting. So
where do you think his niche lies?
Seems to be superhero team books.
Yeah, I really think the superhero team book. I mean, as that he has the ability to draw the individual characters and then balance everybody and give everybody. He handles action really well. He handles dialogue and humor really well. Like reading Excalibur, I recently reread. Excalibur's been coming out in trade paperbacks, and they read just as good now as they did back when I was 13, if not better. Now I'm a little older and I have a little more appreciation for it. So
didn't seem to work out too well with the X-Men books. Yeah,
that was kind of it didn't hit, and I don't know if it's more Claremont's fault because he was just basically drawing Claremont's story. Let's blame Claremont. Damn you, Claremont again. So anyway,
Alan Davis is one of our favorite artists. He is one of the industry top. I wish he would.
And I really think he's not that underrated, but I don't think he gets enough recognition.
I think that's underrated. I mean, not getting enough recognition is underrated. He's not recognized as.
Maybe he's very difficult to deal with.
I don't think so.
Like when it comes to contract time, he's just and I must have green M&Ms. And that's why they won't.
Well, I think one of the reasons why is you don't see him a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can't tell you the last book I bought that he drew.
Right.
I really can tell
Another nail, 2004.
I'd hope not.
Fantastic Four: The End.
I didn't buy that.
You didn't buy that.
Well, you should have.
Anyway, why should have? It was really good. The hardcover's really pretty. Anyway, so if there's something by Alan Davis that we didn't mention that you think that we're idiots to forget about, or I got something wrong about 2000 AD,
there will be.
You can email us at contact@ifanboy.com.
Or you can call the voicemail line at 1-888-FANBOYS, which is 326-2697. We can take Alan Davis phone calls or really anything you want.
Hey, where are you, Alan Davis?
If you're Alan Davis and you want to post on the site and let us know the answers to all of our various questions, you can go to ifanboy.com. There's going to be a post for this show, and there's blog posts and the pick of the week and the audio podcast we do. And you can also go to revision3.com/ifanboy where there's a link to the forums there.
I love Captain Britain. I really do.
Well, why don't you move to England, Kami?
Maybe I will.
Kami?
All of my xenophobia gets mixed up.
Man.
Yeah.
And the
50-something shows.
Sorry. It's all right.